And we are live. Welcome to the fifth SLiTHER. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to have sort of two presenters kind of start us off talking about some of their favorite learning objects on Viper, Kari Stone and Anthony Fernandez, and then hopefully we'll open it up to the rest of the community where it can be questions for them or other people who have talked about their favorite learning objects, or you can bring up your own favorite learning object or ask questions about, hey, I need a learning object on X, Y, or Z. So hopefully we'll have lots of great discussion. And with that, I honestly don't know who's kicking this off. So Anthony, Kari, go.
I think Kari should go first.
Oh, okay. So I need to share my screen.
Oh, I need to give you the power to do that, don't I?
You need to let me do that.
You've got the power.
All right. All right, everybody can see this, right? Okay, awesome. Okay, so this was sort of so this is our fifth SLiTHER, which has this strange acronym. So as you all know, we're Ionic Viper, so we like things about snakes, so SLiTHER worked well. And I think it was Kyle that made up this acronym that is sort of silly, but it makes sense. It's what we've been doing. And so Anthony and I, and maybe Chip if he wants to join in, wanted to sort of showcase some of our favorite LOs. So LOs that we use all the time, and where we use LOs is there a topic that is kind of difficult to teach? That's where LOs can always help us. So if there's something I'm thinking about, like I don't know how to do that, I always go to Viper and I look for something. And there, I'm going to showcase a couple of those that really has done that for me. So first off, we should probably talk about what LOs are. I know everybody here on the call knows what a LO is because we're all part of the community, but really just these are our learning objects. So if we were to go to the teaching resources on the Viper site, this is what it would look like. So we have learning objects in all of these areas of inorganic chemistry. And the types of learning objects you can make go from something that may be kind of difficult to do and some things that are just really easy to put together. So say from like a problem set, which is pretty easy because we all have to do this all the time, all the way up to a full-fledged lab experiment. And so these are all types of learning objects that we could do. Also, if you haven't done so already, in order to access keys for these learning objects, you have to have faculty status. So keep that in mind if you are, rushing to find an LO for your class that's in 10 minutes. All right, so here it is. So the topics that are difficult to teach. So I picked a couple examples that are always really tough for me. I picked an example in Gen Chem, and I picked an example in inorganic. So for me, teaching periodicity absolutely is terrible for freshmen, because you give them the periodic table and you say ionic radii goes this way, and it gets bigger as you go, to the left and down, right? And then, and that's really all they get out of it. And so what I did was I went to Viper and I found a learning object, an in-class activity where students could look at data, so real data, and come up with the trends themselves, which to me is a lot more exciting than me just telling them what the trends are. Another thing that's sort of difficult to teach, this comes from inorganic, when I teach inorganic, and that's really how do we use spectroscopy like IR and Raman, and then together with symmetry, where we can then confirm geometries. And so I found a nice LO on Viper where we could do that as an in-class activity. And so what I want you guys to do as we're talking, because this is not about us, this is about everybody that's participating, I want you guys to think about like what kind of topics are difficult for you to teach. And so I was thinking that you guys could use the chat function and just kind of type in things that come to mind. And then at the end, after, you know, Anthony and I have talked to you for some time, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about what type of topics are difficult to teach. And guess what? There's probably an LO for that. So we can talk about that. All right, so first off, this comes from my General Chemistry 1 class. And so the LO I want to focus on is Barb Reisner's, and this is, you guys are going to all know this one, periodically periodic. So when I do this one and I tell them I do the LO, Barb's periodically periodic, everyone says to me, oh, yeah, I use that one too. So this is a great one for Gen Chem 1. Right after you talk about electron configuration. And so how this works for me is that I usually have them do a 10-minute discussion, or sorry, I give them a 10-minute discussion lecture type thing. Or you could alternatively do this prior to coming to class. So say you take yourself and they have to watch the video before they come. But they do need a little bit of content knowledge in order to start this activity. I learned this the hard way. I just started in, and that was a disaster. So give them a little content first. I have the students work in pairs, and I usually just circulate around the room with a teaching assistant. So if I were to do this remotely, I would have them break into breakout rooms in Zoom or whatever system you use. When I have classes, it's usually 25 to 40 students, so it works with, it can work with larger classes, it can work with really small classes. And then when I do this LO, it's gonna take about a class and a half if they do it all together. And so you could do this a couple ways. You could have them finish it as a group work project where they you know, come up with the rest of the worksheet at another time, or you could really devote a class and a half to it. It depends on how far in the periodic trends you want to go. Another thing about LOs is they're adaptable. So if it's not exactly what you want to do, you can change it. And so I changed it a little bit. I added a 4th section of the periodic trends where I have the students, they just essentially just put it all together and draw the periodic trends for me. And so this is going to work. Oh, perfect. All right. So this is a link to the periodically periodic. And so when you go to Viper, this is what you're going to see when you search for LOs. And you're going to see the learning goals. You're going to see related activities, her implementation notes, and of course, her evaluation methods. All right. So that's all the things you're going to see when you click on the link for the LO. Another thing that you're gonna wanna get is the faculty-only files, which is the key. All right, so this is what it looks like. So this is the first page of the learning object. And so how this works is there are 3 periodic trends that we look at. We look at atomic radius, we look at ionization energy, and electron affinity. And so each part is a trend. So this happens to be the first part, which is ionic radii. Or not ionic radii, sorry, atomic radii. All right, and so, and every part has the data. So that the students would get this worksheet and they see the data, and those are distances, those are the atomic radii. And so they're gonna look at those numbers, and hopefully they can, you know, do smallest to largest. They're going to look at the numbers, and they're going to come up with a trend. So what is the atomic trend? Atomic radii trend. So they're going to use data to do that. That's why I love this one so much, because we're like really looking at data, and they have to come up with the conclusions on their own. Not only that, but there's always some anomalies in this periodic trends, and they have to come up with ideas based on their electron configurations on why is, you know, gallium smaller than aluminum, right? So that's one of the anomalies. And so they come up with not only the trends, but they also have to give some reasoning on the anomalies that they see. All right. So that is for Gen Chem 1. I also wanted to choose an inorganic chemistry example. And so this is where sometimes I get frustrated teaching students. How do you turn, the symmetry that they've already learned about? How do they turn, the character tables and, in molecular orbitals and all that stuff? And how do we use spectroscopy to not only look at symmetry, but also how does that relate to the geometry of the molecule? And so, again, this is a famous one. Lots of people use this one. So this is using symmetry and IR and Raman spectroscopy to figure out what is the geometry of this thing. And so if we were going to do this problem, and it's a problem set or in-class activity, it could be either, depending on how you want to use it. I would do this in an advanced inorganic course unless you've done symmetry at the foundational level. And so I've never had that experience because the only inorganic chemistry I've ever taught has been advanced inorganic. And of course, because it's advanced inorganic, it's always a small number of students. So 8 to 10 typically. They work in pairs. I always pair them up to do this. And students really like this. I know, crazy. Students like something, but they like it because it really brings it all together for them. I do this at the end of when I talk about symmetry and group theory. And so it brings it together into a nice real life example. All right, so this is what it would look like if we were to find this LO on Viper. So you can see there's a description. Not only do you have the learning object, but you also have the solutions to it. And of course, web resources, because this is based on an actual journal article. So then you could click there and it would bring you to the article. All right, and this is what it looks like. So I added in those point groups. The students don't see that. So essentially what we have is we know that it's a cobalt tetracarbonyl with a boronyl ligand. And so the boronyl ligand could be either in the equatorial plane, it could be in the axial plane, or it could be in the axial plane with all of the CO ligands in the equatorial plane. And so what that does is it gives rise to 3 different symmetries. And it turns out, what they figure out in the end is that they're going to get different IR and Raman stretching frequencies depending on the symmetry. All right, and so what they can do is they can look at those 2 types of spectroscopy, or even IR alone, because that's one of the questions, right? So it says, down here it says, oh, I have no mouse now. It says, would IR spectroscopy alone be sufficient? Because most people don't use Raman a lot. And it turns out in the end that yes, they could just use IR and they could find out what the geometry of this thing is. So that one is a lot of fun. And that's all I got. So I was going to let Anthony take over and tell us the LOs that he likes to use.
Thanks, Kari. And so I am one of those people who Kari mentioned. I love the periodic LO. I use it at the beginning of my inorganic course. And if anyone uses that, I actually have an Excel spreadsheet where I was bored one day and I hand typed in all of the data for all the elements, for the electronegativities, the first ionization energies, the atomic radii, and I'd be happy to share that spreadsheet with you. I've been meaning to turn it into an LO to share it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Okay, so I just dropped in the chat the 3 LOs that I use. You know, one of the challenges with teaching inorganic chemistry is that our subject is a mile wide. You know, I was trained as a small molecule coordination chemist. I know, frankly, almost nothing about solid state chemistry. And I know even less about bioinorganic chemistry. Because back when I was an undergraduate, and you know, I wasn't required to take any biochemistry course as an undergraduate when I got my degree. So I've never taken a formal course in biochemistry. So everything I do now is flying by the seat of my pants. But yet when you look at my foundation level class, in the past 10 years, I've gone from a class that is almost that was almost entirely chemistry majors with no biochemistry majors or any majors in biology or health science who were getting a chem minor, to now being my class almost entirely students who are biochemistry majors or majors in health science or biology who are getting a chem minor. So one topic that I never taught until about, I would say, 6 or 7 years ago was bioinorganic chemistry. And then when I realized that I had to keep these students interested and I needed to talk about it, I then had a panic attack and said, well, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And so I really need to find some way to incorporate this information into my class. And so I chose, I have 3 LOs and I'm just going to show them quickly, and I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. And I'm just going to show my desktop. Okay, and hopefully you're seeing my browser window here. And so the first LO that I really love is this one from Sheila. It's called Bioinorganic Introduction, the Periodic Table. And this involves handing the students out a blank periodic table and then asking them to highlight the elements that have roles in biological systems. And so I'm going to call up the answer key. So here's the answer key. And so in the LO, I ask students to highlight essential metals, ones that are thought to be toxic, and then ones that have roles therapeutically. I also add under medicinal, I also tell them that this also counts if it's used as a diagnostic tool as well. And so students can highlight, as Sheila did it. I have my students do it on their iPad and I put them in groups and we have really great discussions. And the reason why I love this LO so much, because it only takes about 10 minutes for the students to finish, but it really gets them out of that mindset that now biochemistry is only about the big 4 elements, C, H, N, and O, right? You know, and they realize that there are a lot more elements that play quite significant roles in biological chemistry. So I usually start off with that LO. Then I usually move on to another of Sheila's, because the question that I then like to ask my students is, well, where do these metals come from in the body? And so I really like this LO about solubility and the need for ion transport. And I really like this because this harkens back to something they do in Gen Chem 2. They have to do a little bit of math to calculate a free energy, and they use the Van 't Hoff equation to calculate it at body temperature. So then we can get a K value. And if you look at this, it's a relatively straightforward calculation where students look at the KSP for ferric hydroxide, and when they come down, they realize, and I'm just going to scroll down, that the concentration of iron is actually incredibly small. And then if you calculate this out over the liters of blood that's in the body, you find that that's not the amount that most people have in them. And so it's a great way to talk about, well, how do we get this iron in the body? And so I find students struggle with this one a bit more because they're a little bit away from Gen Chem 2, so they don't think about the math as much. But when they do it and they realize what the numbers are, they're like, wow, like I didn't realize it was that small. So I really love that one. And I usually do these two LOs in class, and I usually do them in the first class that I teach on bio inorganic. So I do the periodic table one at the beginning of class, and I tend to do this one towards the end of class. And the reason why I do this at the end is because if they don't finish, I let them go finish it as a homework assignment. And then we begin the next class with this. And then the third one that I just quickly want to mention is now that we've talked about the fact that we don't have these ions freely floating in our blood, where do they exist? I talk about how we have proteins that bind these metals. And then Betsy Jameson has a really great LO where she uses structures from the PDB to have students look how metals are bound to proteins. And so I usually assign this as an out of class assignment. So I usually start a class where I quickly go through the PDB, I give my students a quick introduction, and then I ask them to do this. So this LO starts with a quick review of the 20 standard amino acids. Students are asked which side chains have atoms that could act as donors and then allow these to behave as ligands towards metals. Then what Betsy does is she instructs them to, for instance, to go into the PDB and actually look at the coordination environment around the metal in a particular structure. And she asks questions for all of these about the geometry, which side chains are being used. Is this side chain, is it bridging? Is it terminal? And things like that. And I love this LO for several reasons, because I feel very comfortable talking about structure. And so it allows me a way to enter into bioinorganic and talk about structure, which I feel okay talking about. And I can sort of go dabble and help my students go and dabble in how these big proteins can act as really big ligands. And it allows them to sort of translate what they learned about small molecule ligands into proteins. And so I really love this. I know Betsy is updating this, I think right now as we speak, because the viewer that she uses in this is a bit out of date. They don't use that anymore in the PDB, and I know she's coming out with new instructions for this. So hopefully those will be out soon, but I would be happy to answer any questions that people have about any of these, and I would love to hear if there are any others that people like. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There you go.
All right. Well, I'm certainly happy to talk about something, but I'm even happier to let our participants talk about anything. So if there are any questions, comments, or someone wants to share their own favorite, Carmen, let's see. Do I need to give you the power to speak, or are we good?
I think I'm okay.
You're good. Great.
Okay. So I do use Anthony, I use that, the LO that Sheila had to calculate the solubility of iron. But then what I do, then there's another LO that talks about the iron that killed us.
Yeah, the one by Kathy Franz.
I think so. It's the article from the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And so my students really like that a lot. So then we can talk about the chelate effect.
I
Force and things like that.
I use that one in my advanced bio inorganic class that I get to teach on a regular basis, even though I know nothing about bioinorganic chemistry.
I don't either, but thank you.
Thanks, Carmen.
Oh, that's a scary sound. Other questions, comments? Well, then you're going to be stuck with me. Let me make sure I'm all set here. Where's my window? Where'd it go? Did I close it again? Oh, I was searching for something. That's right. So Anthony said a lot of things that I feel are very similar and true for me also. I've never taken a biochem class. I'm going to spin this in a slightly different direction and say that, how does one tactfully say this? I came up with a real profound dislike for solid state inorganic chemistry in graduate school when members of one particular group would give talks, and it was, we cooked A, B, and C together at 1500 degrees for 8 hours and we got this crystal structure. And then we did it for 9 hours and we got this crystal structure. And they would be going through 50, 60 crystal structures in a talk. And it just wasn't very exciting. It was what I called shake and bake chemistry. And so that did not set me up well for teaching, in particular, solid state sorts of things, which was something I realized I had to do, and I do it in my sophomore level course. And it really didn't set me up well for doing it in lab. So one of my favorite LOs is this one, in which we do synthesis and characterization of zinc oxide nanoparticles. Making nanoparticles is not in my skill set, but this lab has worked great for me. It is, well, there's no baking, so it's not shake and bake, but it's mix and go. We get nice zinc oxide nanoparticles, and it also allows us to take a class trip. I sell this really hard at the start of my course and say, everyone in lab, we get to take a class trip this year, and they're all excited. And then they find out we have to walk maybe 250 feet to the geology building where our powder XRD instrument is housed. So we go over there and do powder diffraction on our nanoparticles. The first time I did it, of course, I'm like, yay, I've got peaks. What does this mean? So fortunately, I was able to get some feedback and realized, hey, we were making nanoparticles. We got good data. And this has actually opened the door to me to bringing in a little bit more X-ray background and theory into my sophomore level course. We talk about Miller indices and get into the experiment a little bit greater than I had when I first introduced this lab, because I think it's interesting and useful, and they're certainly not going to get it anywhere else. The labs become a fun competition every year. We go over and we run it, and we see whose sample gets the best hit in their database as to being zinc oxide. Generally, we sit around like an 80% match to zinc oxide. This past year, for some reason, it happened before COVID, and we got really good matches to the reported powder diffraction. Occasionally, we've had some interesting occurrences with this. One year, our best matches had no zinc or oxygen in them. I'm not sure what happened to the nanoparticles, but it was really fun. I told my student that she was doing nuclear chemistry, and transmutated all of her elements in the reaction, and I called her Nuke after that. So that's been fun, and to this day I still do. So yeah, that's one of my favorites, just because it's something that there is no way on my own I would come up with or introduce this type of lab. But it's a staple. I like it. It works well. And it's a great lab. So those are some of my thoughts. We've seen some great diversity in the different types of things on Viper, which is, a major selling point on it. Anyone else have thoughts they want to share? We could even go crazy and go into breakout rooms if we wanted to, but I think we're a small enough group that we don't need to do that. But does anyone have a favorite out there they'd like to share with a group? Or even better, I really need an LO on this. What can we do about that?
I'll just say quickly that the Discord has enabled a really nice, I'll turn on my video, you can see I exist. The Discord has really enabled some real-time LO generation for me this semester and summer. I was complaining about how I really wish that I had an Alfred Werner 5 slides about, and Brad Wiley was like, oh, I have one. I just haven't ever put it on the site. And it was up in an hour and I used it the next day. So, I mean, this just-in-time teaching is something that the leadership council of the group has used forever. I mean, we've been running this site for 12 years, 10 years, and every once in a while we'll be like, I need this tomorrow at 9, and someone will have something that's, I mean, it's always easier to edit than it is to create it from scratch. Discord is our, I don't even know how to describe it. It's an asynchronous chat room, basically. It came out of the gaming community. So if you want to sound cool to your students, you can say that you're on a Discord channel. Apparently gamers use it, but it's a chat room. And if you go to Viper.
I'm finding the link right now.
Okay. It's also right at the top of the main page, I think, but you can join and request LOs.
Yeah, I actually just recently asked for one. I'm teaching an intro to research, and I asked if people had examples of people being wrong in chemistry, right? It seems like changing your mind or anything like that is not really the cool thing to do. And before I knew it, checked back on it, and I think I had like 5 or 6 different responses with way more information that I could ever cram into like the 20-minute period that I was going to try to put that information in. So it was very helpful.
Other thoughts? I'll plug the Discord for Joe and tell him go ahead and sign up. I think it's really done a wonderful thing of bringing the entire community, well, not the entire, but a large portion of the community together. We've pulled in a lot of different people, and there have been some great conversations. It's the leadership group is actually fairly quiet in most of the conversations because the community is carrying things forward and doing great stuff there. So check it out. Good way to reach out and meet new people.
Yeah, I'll say with things being as they will be in the fall, I'm kind of, we'll say, adventuring maybe faster than I would have normally liked into doing more of a flipped classroom, which means I am frantically looking up lots of LOs and things for, it's like, ooh, all right, so today is the day we're going to talk about ligand field theory. What's the LO that I can use for ligand field theory, rather than having to spend my entire summer both recording lectures and creating an entire class's worth of LOs. So it's been super helpful.
Yeah, and if you weren't following the chat earlier, there was a request about seeing which LOs are adopted a lot and highly favorited. I've put in the request to our site development team, and hopefully that's something we can add to the search list. It was there in the previous version of Drupal, and we're slowly discovering all the things that didn't quite make it into the new version of Drupal. As is often the case, updates lose things.
Yeah, I will say I miss the ability to either filter or order my searches, or even just my favorites, because at this point I have a ton of favorites just by what type of LO. I'm like, I know I had a literature discussion saved here somewhere, and then I can't find it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I will add that to the request list also.
One thing you can do to organize your own favorites is to create a collection. Does everyone have can anyone create a collection, Chip?
I believe they can, yes.
So,
Any registered faculty user.
I create a collection for my organometallics class for all the literature LOs that I use in that class every time I teach the class. And it's useful to no one except me, but it's useful to me, so you can do that.
But I think that's an excellent point, and yeah, we can look into adding that. Let me do that while I'm thinking of it. And please, that's too right here now that we've gotten great suggestions from the community. We welcome them. Let's see, where were you previously able to search by level as well? The search was definitely filterable.
I hate to oversell our old search. I mean,
yeah, it was not great at all. Let's see, LO type, subdiscipline. I can add a comment on that too. Sure. Yeah. So that's doing a filtered search you're asking there. Just like now you can do a search by LO type and filter. Okay. Yep. Got it. Good. Other thoughts, comments? I'm multitasking. That's never a good thing.